Great. So again, welcome everybody. I'm pleased to welcome you to the first of 4 training sessions on the timely topic of engaging volunteers in a world that has changed forever. So in the next slide, you'll see that my name is Nathalie Lafrenière. I'm the Regional Director for the CSS Regional Resources for CCSN. And I'm happy to introduce Laurie Gottlieb of the Gottlieb Consulting joining us today for the first of the 3-part session dedicated to volunteer management. I'll let Laurie introduce herself just in a moment. So we just want to take a moment in slide 3 to do a land acknowledgement. So today we are meeting on the unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people. We honor the land and peoples of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe whose ancestors have lived on this territory since time immemorial and whose culture and presence have nurtured and continue to nurture this land. We honor all First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people, their elders, their ancestors, and their valuable past and present contributions to this land. Miigwech. So as we go to slide 4, we welcome you to our Engage series, where we offer personal development opportunities to build capacity within organizations and the sector. Our sessions will be recorded and shared on our online knowledge hub for CSS member organizations. So please visit the communityhomesupport.ca/members to discover the documents, reports, and resources to help your organization make informed decisions and enhance programs and practices in community support services. So over to you, Laurie.
Great. Thank you so much, Natalie. It's a privilege and a pleasure to be teaching one of 4 sessions. This particular session is kind of like the overreaching one, and then the next 3 sessions we're going to go into more detail in specific areas of the volunteer management cycle. Before we start, a couple of my housekeeping things. You'll see on this slide, you have my contact information. So even if the half hour is not enough and you want to talk to me, feel free to reach out anytime. I find that, I try to be as open as I can and help wherever I can. You also have my website, which has a lot of articles and some tips and tools. And I took some of my workshops and I created these, what I thought was going to be a very easy activity, these podcasts, these little 10-minute micro education pieces. So there's 8 of them there. It was more daunting than I thought it was. So I haven't done a lot of new ones, but I will keep growing that knowledge base. Couple of other things. So we have an hour. I do have slides. You're getting the slides. I tend to work to the slides, but every now and then I may skip a slide or focus on one slide more than another. So when you put in the evaluation, didn't follow the slides, I'm okay with that. So the slides are a guide. There's something for you to look at, but every workshop I do is a little bit different. Give you a little bit of history about myself. My expertise and my whole career has been volunteer management. So I fell into the field by accident, but for the past, let's say 30 years, I have run and developed volunteer programs, mostly in direct services, a lot in the fields that you guys work in. I built local programs, provincial programs, national programs, worked with boards and committees, and about, 15, 20 years ago, my thing is I challenge the profession. I'm not so much about the volunteers themselves, but how do we engage volunteers? How do we market ourselves? Like how do we as volunteer coordinators, whatever your title is, run successful businesses within our nonprofits? So I started writing articles. The articles turned into workshops. The workshops became, I ended up doing a lot more workshops. And at one point about, let's say 9 years ago, I decided to take a leap of faith and kind of didn't want to work full time anymore for one particular organization and kind of went off on my own. So, it's consulting, but I go and I help organizations with one-off projects or build programs, do a lot of teaching and workshops. I've taught thousands. And in fact, about 8 years ago, I contacted Humber College and said the program sucked. They agreed. I rebuilt it, taught that for 7 years. So I really am embedded in volunteerism, volunteer engagement, volunteer management specifically. Just a little side, my side hustle is I actually work for Elections Canada as well. I was a federal returning officer, so this is my retirement plan. And recently in the summer was promoted up to a field liaison officer. So I actually support 10 regions in Toronto. So I'm kind of doing a lot of things at the same time, which is what I like. This particular workshop that we're going to talk about now really came from the thinking of mostly from the pandemic, but I'm not 100% sure whether it's the pandemic that set this off or the pandemic just put a light on it, on how we have to look at volunteer programs differently. And I'm going to start this with something I noticed yesterday in LinkedIn. Joanne McKieran, who's the Executive Director of Volunteer Toronto, posted an article that she had written in the Philanthropy. And it was really focused on why volunteers can't sustain essential services. And a lot of the focus was related to Meals on Wheels, those direct service programs that are struggling, was struggling before the pandemic, but like even more of the grassroots stuff. And I just wanted to read one quote because it's like, just hits me. The supply of volunteers and the reality of prioritizing basic needs in challenging times means we cannot rely on volunteers for the same types of roles, time commitments, or skills exchange as in the past. And it is so true. What was is not what is. And so there are some things that have come out that are they're actually tried and true now at this point. So I'm going to like focus on some of this stuff and how we can make some of these changes. So number one, technology is king. So volunteers, those that are interested in volunteering, those that you're trying to reach out, you've got to get on social media. You've got to be active, both in telling stories, showing impact, showing value, showing benefits, and you have to do it consistently. On top of that, volunteers want short-term commitments. Now, not to say that they won't stay in the long term, because they will, but they won't commit to the long term right from the beginning. So a lot of the organizations I've been working with, that is their biggest trouble. We can't get volunteers to commit long term because nobody's thinking long term right now. It has gotten to the point where people are functioning in the moment and in the present. So in fact, on the news today, they were talking about how donations have dropped. When donations dropped, volunteerism drops as well. People are hunkering down. So we have to look at how do we take those trends and work them to our benefit. So looking at your volunteer programs, looking at what you can do short term, looking at how you can do so short term may even be creating a buddy system so that they don't feel like they're have to commit every single week, that maybe it's two people doing the same job. We need to look at how do we support our volunteers using technology. So this is a perfect example, like we're doing a virtual workshop right now. Are there ways that you can engage with your volunteers, not only in the pre-placement, but in the retention? So are there opportunities to do short educations, soft skill learning, learning about them, what their transferable skills are, which is another trend. Volunteers want to use the skills that they have, and in many ways they don't know what is transferable to your organization. So you have to look at what it is that you're going to get out of it, but also what volunteers can give and or learn. Volunteers now are more strategic. So like everything else coming out of COVID, we're looking at what's important to us and what's not important to us. And experiences are actually an opportunity here because people are looking at, you only live once, live life to the fullest. So you need to figure out how you can sell and package that. And we're going to go more into detail when we do the marketing workshop on how it can be a beneficial, impactful experience for volunteers. You also need to be able to tell the stories. So volunteers are looking for organizations that they feel they can trust implicitly, that are also accountable financially, accountable to their stakeholders. And again, telling those stories and using things like your website to paint the picture of who you are and why would a volunteer want to get engaged with you. So again, that's going to be part of the marketing workshop, but that website is your dating site. So how can you use that better? Virtual volunteering is key. It's important that you have that platform, or at minimum, and I know a lot of the organizations that you guys represent are very direct service, hands-on volunteering, but that's not to say we can't add a layer. So for example, friendly visiting, can we add a virtual friendly visiting? Can we add a social club that's done virtually? Are there ways that we can engage with our volunteers to support each other? So even though let's say they're working direct service and they may be doing their volunteer work alone, but maybe there's a friendly visiting buddy group that you could build virtually. So adding these kind of unique opportunities are important. Education as recognition is also another trend. People want to keep learning, and it's an important value added proposition for volunteers, as well as the ability to show the impact and give opportunities to provide feedback. So it is a relationship. The final one is, and it doesn't really affect us so much because I believe that volunteer programs were the forefront of diversity, equity, and inclusion. I don't believe that we ever weren't equitable, weren't inclusive, or weren't diverse. In fact, I think our programs are probably the most flexible going into it. But it is a trend that we have to be aware of, and we have to embrace, and we have to celebrate. So those are some of the trends that we're dealing with. As administrators or volunteers, you have to think in two ways. So this is where I kind of challenge you back. There's the logic, the volunteer management cycle. How do we run the cycle? What do we have to do? What's the administrative side of things? But we also have to become more imaginative. We have to be more creative. There is a lot of competition out there for people's time, and we have to look at what can we do that at minimum pivots a little bit, shifts a little bit, at maximum brand new programming. And again, when the pandemic kicked in, there were some amazing programs that were delivered that were never thought to be able to be delivered before. So for example, there were community centers that were taking their programs online for their clients. Prior to the pandemic, they never would have thought to do that. So what ideas can you come up with, or what questions can you ask? So, consider asking staff, asking your stakeholders, asking your volunteers, how can we do things better? How can we support you better? So it's looking at those two critical ways of thinking that you all have to have, because the fact is we're in a new normal, right? If you look at the generations, they're so different. If you look at the younger generation, they function completely differently. And that's what I'm saying. Social media is going to be very important as we move forward. New opportunities have to be developed. So what we had as volunteer opportunities, if you can't get volunteers for those roles, there is that possibility that that role has kind of died. Even though your clients need it, if you can't get volunteers to do it, you have to rethink how are we going to do that. So for example, Meals on Wheels, struggling to get volunteers, it may be an opportunity where we start looking at partnerships with companies or partnerships with schools. I don't know, but you're going to have to look at it differently. You also have to look at the idea that the younger generation is everything is in their hand. So if they're checking you out, they're going to, before they even talk to you, they're going to look you up. They're going to look you up on social media, and they're going to look at your website. So the ability to be able to multitask is really important, because as you see in this photo here, this is the generation that we have. I tell the story. I have a 28 and 25-year-old at home, and they hate when I tell this. So my 25-year-old lives in the basement, and I'll call down, Matthew, nothing. So I'll call his cell phone. I don't have a big house, nothing. I text him, I get an immediate response. Like, this is the world that we're living in right now. And if we don't embrace it, then we're going to have more struggles as we move forward. So we have to, we start at the beginning, you have to think about change management. And there's a lot of theories on change management. There's a lot of information out there on change management. But basically, it's about looking at your system. So within your organization, you have change management happening, but you guys run a business within a business that I always say is you're like the octopus. You cannot run volunteer programs as a silo. It just doesn't exist because you are a department that feeds other departments, right? So you have to involve others. You have to ask the questions. You can't kind of sit there and go, okay, how am I going to, here's my problem. How am I going to solve the problem by myself? You can't. You have to involve others. You also have to understand where you are now. So you'll come out of this workshop and you'll take a little bit of time. So here's homework number 1. Where are you now? Where do you feel your volunteer program is successful? Where do you think that you could be moving to? What is low-hanging fruit? What are bigger stretches? And then the next question is, where do you want to be? So don't do this in a daunting way. Look at, where do you want to be in 3 months? Where do you want to be in 6 months? Where do you want to be in a year? And then you talk about and you write down. So basically you're creating a strat plan for yourself. How are you going to get there? And who is going to help you get there? And then finally, which I think is the most important part of it, is you can't do this on your own. So you have to communicate, you have to involve others, you have to facilitate feedback, opportunities to talk. So I'll give you an example, and this is kind of an old school example, doesn't happen to everybody, but if you happen to be in a room or in an elevator or in the lunchroom with your CEO, executive director, senior leadership team, have that elevator speech ready. Do not waste that opportunity by going, how was your weekend? How are things going? Take that opportunity, because we don't have the profile we should have. We still don't. Like I said, 30 years of running a volunteer program, and I still believe we're an undervalued, underrated, overworked, underpaid gem in the organization. And so we are our own ambassadors, advocators. So take that opportunity with your, if your EDs and grab me a cup of coffee and you're grabbing a cup of coffee, and say, hey, I've been meaning to email you. I wanted you to know this happened. And tell that quick story, 2-3 lines. And I'd love to be able to have an opportunity to tell you what I'm thinking about how we can leapfrog on this, or how we can build something. So you need to create that opportunity to get you involved at that leadership table. So really what you're looking at minimum is you're modifying the volunteer program. So like I said, low-hanging fruit, looking at how you can transition your program to reflect the needs of both the organization, your clients' families, and your volunteers. And in some ways, it may be just shifting. In some ways, it may be adjusting, but you need to have the ability to pivot. And if you don't have the ability to pivot because you're a standalone staff member, then get people around you that can help you do this. I always say we are the worst of getting our own help. We help everybody else but ourselves. So as you start to think about what it is you can do with a volunteer program, think about who can help you. But the ability is to rethink, and I'm not talking about rethinking the whole program, and I'll show you a slide in a second what I mean, but what areas do you feel are ripe for change? Are there ways that you can repurpose what it is that you already have that's working? So for example, like I said, you have this friendly visiting program that's really successful. Maybe you can repurpose it and bring it up to that layer where it's virtual or added virtual, which will then attract people who are traveling, semi-retired, able to get online from Florida, opportunity for a corporate group to get involved. So think about how you can repurpose what you already have that's working. Be innovative. What I love about our field is that we have the opportunity to be very innovative, but we tend to not do it. Like I said, COVID put us in a position where volunteer programs were shut down. Okay. They're coming back. They're not coming back in some cases at the level that they were coming back, but every other organization, program, department, donor services, financial services, program services are looking at how they can be innovative. So look at how you can innovate. And by doing that, you've got to listen. So question number 2, potential homework number 2. When was the last time that you sent a survey or questions to your volunteers, asking them, what is it about volunteering that works for you? What do you believe your value is? How can you see us helping you feel like you're getting what you want out of your volunteer work? Ask open-ended questions and do this on a regular basis, right? And frame it that without your input, we can't get where we need to get. We need to hear from you because you're an integral part of the volunteer program. Build on successes. If you've got a program that's working really well, mirror it for something else, right? So build on the success that you already have. Use those successes that you have, whether it's impact. So for example, even putting like the impact of the Meals on Wheels program they have reaches 250 people per week, and responds to not only the ability for people to be nutritiously, get food, but also we found that the isolation rate drops by 60%. That information needs to be communicated, and that should be on your website. That should be on some of the information that goes out to your volunteers. Like, your volunteers are a small part of a big picture. How much do they know about the impact that they're providing? So ask people, ask clients, and then pick a goal. Find something that you haven't done in the past year and go, okay, that's what I'm going to focus on this year. So looking at the volunteer management cycle, this is kind of how I do it. This is the cycle, but I've revised it a little bit. So strategic planning has taken over planning because it has to be strategic. Role design is key now because you need to look at your roles and you need to look at what can you do to respond to what's going on in the environment now. So is it 2 people doing one role? Is it the role, but then there's a buddy system attached to that role? Is it just a piece of that role right now, but as the confidence level of the volunteer, it's kind of like fishing, right? Nibble, 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 bite. So, okay, they'll commit to 3 of these, but with the ability to move on to another 3, or that, like you say, okay, let's just try this and see if it works, and then we'll revisit it. Recruitment is now marketing. So again, this is another workshop, but I want to address this. I don't like or don't want to see "we need you." It's implied. I want you to talk about the value, the benefits, sell the volunteer program, right? And marketing is not sales. Marketing is talking about the value of the product. So what is the value? What is the benefits? What benefits you? What benefits us? And then how you do it, right? Who is the right audience for the right person? And again, we'll talk about that related to target marketing, but think in terms of marketing, not in terms of recruitment. Screening and selection is an integral part of every volunteer program, but it's more than just fill out the application form, do the interview, fill out the forms, get the police check done. It's about understanding who the volunteer is, and maybe they came in for role A, but they're best suited for role B. So it's that open-mindedness of placing volunteers in the right role at the right time. Onboarding is pretty basic as to, as to the orientation, the training, and everything you want to do. But it feeds into a new area of retention and support. So yes, it's supervision, but look at how are you going to retain volunteers? And again, other workshop coming, but it's more about relationship building. And recognition is more about the National Volunteer Week, the barbecue, the formal. It's really focused on that ongoing relationship. So why am I giving you this? Because what I want you to do is look at where you think you're doing well at and where you think you could be improving, and that's your starting point. Okay, so like I said to you before, create a goal, look at an area that's going to work for you, and do something called a SWOT analysis. So again, this is part of the strat planning in the new normal. What are your strengths? So as a volunteer program and as an organization, but I'm more focused on the volunteer program, what do you do well? What are you really good at? Then look at where are you not so good? Where do you have internal? These two are more internal. Where are your weaknesses? So an example, I have so much, I'm only one person. I spent all my time recruiting volunteers and going through the process. I don't really have a lot of time to support my volunteers. Like once they're gone, I do my check-ins once a year and so forth, but I probably could be retaining volunteers better, educating volunteers better, or it could be, I've not really changed the way I recruit volunteers. It's always kind of been Facebook, library programs, passive recruitment, Charity Village, the volunteer centers, things like that. So look at the internal side of things. And then the other two are opportunities. So where do you see growth? Where can you gain volunteers, or what new areas can use to be supporting volunteers? So opportunity, virtual, like Natalie said, there is no geographical barriers anymore. So you could be recruiting volunteers virtually. You could be retaining your volunteers by doing education virtually, offering up workshops for volunteers, offering up even things like meet and greet groups, or buddy systems, or coaching, or mentorship. These are opportunities that technology can help you do it. And then threats are things you can't control. And we are in a very volatile time right now. So financially, organizations are struggling, but so are people. And the general population is struggling now. There's not a lot of happiness going on here. So that's a threat, because you're going to communicate your stakeholders. Here are their areas of weakness. This is where they need support, but we also need to recognize that our volunteers also need support. So where are we vulnerable? Do you have competition? Economics is a problem. So for example, Meals on Wheels and driving. I just heard yet today that gas is going up, 15 cents a liter? Like that is a huge price for volunteers to take, as well as their time. So what is threatening us? So this is all part of that thinking where we're kind of, what has come out? Where are the issues that we're dealing with? And how do we address it? But at the end of the day, you guys are leaders. Okay, so you wear, what I love about this field is we wear multiple hats. We wear a management hat, but we also wear a leadership hat. So what does that mean? Right? That means that you are customer facing, right? It's a business. You're marketing something. You're team building, right? So like I said to you at the beginning of this workshop, you don't work alone. You don't work in a silo. You have the ability to support in so many ways that I kind of see the volunteer program as an iceberg. And you see a lot of these graphics that you only see 10%, 90% is under the surface. And I believe the volunteer program is like that. People only see 10%. The value is at 90%. So what I'm challenging you to do is reach into those 90% and say, what can you bring to the surface so that your boss, your supervisor, your leadership volunteers, your board, which is a very important ally for you, understands your ability to strategically think, to optimize what you have as in your toolkit, that your sales and marketing skills are there, and that you are always focused on the mission, the vision, and the values, and the goals, and the objectives of the organization. So it's a partnership, and your role is to be a leader because you, in most cases, are the expert of volunteers, right? So really, really important role, but we as a tendency, like I said, I've taught thousands of volunteer coordinators. We underplay ourselves. We're that soft group. We don't make a lot of noise. We're not overly loud. We just want to help, right? And that works for us and against us at the same time. So we have to recognize that. Okay. So I want to talk a little bit about technology. Again, going to deal with a lot of it in the next workshop, but technology is important and it's where we're going. Okay. As it happens, not that I want to go into this because even I don't know a ton about it. AI, it is going to change everything that we do. So I know volunteer coordinators are using AI to create role descriptions. I know that they're using it to create handbooks. I know that they're using it to write newsletters, right? So there is a future related to artificial intelligence that's going to help us. Technology is really the majority of ways that we can market or recruit volunteers. What the beauty of it is the reach is huge. So LinkedIn, for example, is this vast network that people want to grow. So we have access to people, to organizations, to companies, to high-level executives we never would be able to get our hands on. So looking at that, targeting that, using LinkedIn, using Facebook, using Instagram, using Snapchat, but using it appropriately, because I can tell you now, what does my son call Facebook? It's grandma's notebook or a place to sell furniture. So, you got to know who your audience is, but depending on where you live and depending on your community, Facebook may be great. Like I know that I have a cottage up near Gravenhurst, and there's a Gravenhurst Facebook page that is highly active and a lot of not-for-profit storytelling going on in there. So it's amazing. So you've got to use technology. The other reason to use technology is a way to support your volunteers. That's easy, right? One email to 100 people at once. BCC them, please. And it's a quick thank you for something. It's a quick update for something. Like, when was the last time that you actually sent a communication out to your volunteers related to your, let's say, your annual report, and you pull out some stats and you go like, because of you, this is what we're able to do. So just as simple as just sharing the value and the benefits and the impact, but also things like badging. So some of you are going, what's badging? So the new thing is, so badges are virtual certificates, virtual gifts that you can create and send it to volunteers who can then put it on their social media site or their LinkedIn site, almost like a certificate. So there's sites that you can do free badging, so look it up, but it's a great way of thanking and recognize volunteers immediately, right? So I'm not taking away from the what we call the traditional recognition. We need to add to that, because if you look at it, you also have to look at the different generations. Technology for training. I don't need to say much more than that, but use it to your advantage, right? It's cheap, it's free. You can even get volunteers teaching volunteers. You could be doing your direct service kind of training, but also, again, soft skills or mentorship or coaching. And finally, like I said, I talked about communication already, but the actual volunteer work. What can we add to the grouping of volunteer opportunities that we have now that will build in a hybrid or virtual side of things? Because I never, ever want, and we don't know whether we'll shut down again. So, we hope this will never happen again, but I have to tell you, I'm doing an aside here. So remember when the pandemic started and we were all hoarding toilet paper and couldn't find toilet paper? So I bought a big thing of toilet paper from Costco. It's shrink wrapped. It's sitting in the basement. And my family knows that is the apocalyptic toilet paper, which means you do not touch it because I'm never, ever going through that again. So it's the same thing with volunteer work. You want to be able to be flexible and pivot. Never do we want you programs to have to shut down again. All right, what happened here? Look at your website. Your website is your voice. It's your face. It's your dating profile. And coming out of, the emerging trends is everybody checks everybody out. So if you look at your website and you have really basic information, or it's so hard even to find out where you volunteer or where the volunteer tab is, you need to rethink that. So what I'm challenging you to do is get someone else to look at your website and see what they see, because you're vested in it. So looking at the website and say, okay, what did you get out of the volunteer pages of this? Few things to highlight. Do not put your full role descriptions on the website. Okay, that's not what the home for those things are. In fact, they're deterrents. So you want to do a marketing blurb and then some value and benefits, impact statements, things like generic photos don't really work because people are smarter than that. There's got to be something, infographics, things that are going to add punch. But what is it you want to say on your website related to how to volunteer, the benefits of volunteering, the return on investment, the impact, and then things that they need to know to get started? One of the biggest complaints I also get is people will fill out the application form through the website, and then the response time is way too long. You must respond within 24 hours. And even if the response is no response, which I mean is we're really busy, we got your application form, somebody will be reaching out within 5 days. If you don't hear anything in 5 days, please email us but make sure somebody reaches out. The biggest reason why people do not volunteer is because, well, A, they haven't been asked. Number two is they sent it out and got no immediate response. People want instant gratification. They don't want to wait. And then what ends up happening is they start bad-mouthing you. So I can tell you many situations, many organizations where I won't recommend volunteers to, but scenarios where highly educated, highly talented volunteers have reached out to volunteer and never heard anything. So it's not good. So you want to make sure that you have that information. Look at opportunities that are project focused. Like I said to you at the beginning, the long-term commitment, honestly, it means nothing. To you, it means something. To them, it doesn't. So you say, well, you need to have it, you need to volunteer for a year. Well, if they're not happy and if it's not working, they're not going to stay anyhow. The other thing is you have no repercussions. This is not employment, right? They will just start disappearing. They'll just start not showing up. They'll start being grumpy, so be project focused if you can. Be time limited. Okay, we're going to try this for 3 months and then we're going to, discuss it and see where we go from here. And I know you're thinking there's a lot of time put into onboarding volunteers, and if they don't commit for the year, then what's our return on investment? Here's the thing. Does it really matter? Because if they love what they're doing, they will continue. But they don't want to make the commitment up front. You know how you have situations where I don't want to be chair, but I'll be co-chair, right? What's the difference? The difference is they're not feeling confident enough to take it on for themselves. So you go, okay, we do co-chair. And then what ends up happening, one of them, leadership skills, rises to the top, right? So it would more beneficial to say, okay, listen, this is what we're going to do. You're going to be chair, but we're going to add a mentor, a buddy, somebody who's going to help you. So somebody who's done the role before, who will be able to do knowledge transfer, support you, coach you. So think about this. What a great role for volunteers that are on their way out, to support volunteers that are on their way in, which then takes the pressure off of you. So having a group of volunteer mentors or coaches is a great idea. Be flexible. Allow volunteers to have vacations. It's important. People want that flexibility. Also, people want to feel like they can grow. I do not see a lot of roles other than board and committee that sell the opportunity for leadership. So what does that mean? Like I said, I've just given you a couple of examples: coaching, mentorship, knowledge transfer, past president that stays on for another year as a buddy. And look at the different markets. So where you normally recruited volunteers and marketed volunteers, where are some unique opportunities? So for example, I talk a lot about associations as a market, and a very, very much untapped market. So again, that goes to that marketing planning kind of side of things. But look at things that, like, look at new roles. So I've talked about virtual, I've talked about hybrid. I'm going to mention third party in a second. Skill-based volunteering. So, okay, you may not be able to get volunteers to do your traditional volunteer stuff, or you're struggling with that. But what about other roles that can support the roles that you have? So somebody who's got skills that they can share. So I've always been a fan of, okay, here are the 10 volunteer opportunities this organization has. This is all we're looking for. No, this is what we're looking for, but we're also open to, creative volunteer roles. So I was always a fan of, sometimes my interviews stopped and went into discussions. And I created some amazing volunteer roles over the years just by the nature of my volunteers having these skills that I didn't even know if I hadn't taken the time to ask the questions. Tell me what you do, what you did, and explain that out to me a little bit further. And then reaching out to my staff in various departments and say, okay, here's an opportunity here. The other two that are big are micro volunteering, which is very, very much short term, but very short term. So in, out, and third party volunteering. So it's a theory that's still kind of in volunteering, but not in volunteering. So I'll give you the example of it. And this is an actual story. Baycrest Hospital has this is pre-COVID, but they may be doing it back again, created a partnership with a school. So we're not talking about the 40 hours. We're not talking about something heavily traditional. There was a particular class, I think it was a grade 12 class, that wanted to get engaged with Baycrest on a social side of things. So what they did was they had a conversation and they talked about an opportunity, and the school, that this class of kids proposed during hockey season, we will create a hockey themed event. We will build it all in the school. So the activities, all the things that are going to happen get built at the school. So I think they did a bingo. They also, actually, believe it or not, they built hockey sticks, and then they would bring them to the social, create a social event related to a Maple Leaf game, and they had a whole function, and they played hockey with the residents in wheelchairs, and they had food related to whatever that game was. So it was partially built at the school level and then brought into the organization to deliver. What a great idea. So just an idea to think of. The other thing is we have to consider is inclusivity, and I'm not specifically meaning inclusive as in cultures and religions and unrecognized, untargeted, groups of people that you've not had before. I'm building on that. Sorry, hold on. Look at who has different experiences and perspectives that you have not worked with before. So you may be talking about a cultural group that has not been engaged with you from a volunteer basis. You may be looking at a skills group, like a group of artists. So look at who has different experiences and perspectives that will add value to your volunteer program. Who can expand the way you do things? So again, we cannot do things in a silo. Part of administering a volunteer program is you're the conductor. And it's like with committees, the chair. You are the conductor of your program. You bring in the instruments that help you create this beautiful song. It's not your job to play all those instruments. It's your job to get the people in. So look at who's not at the table. So when you're going back to that beginning few slides, when I was talking about strat planning, one of the questions you need to ask is who's at the table that needs to be at the table. Who can expand your reach? So maybe you're looking at a group of volunteers that are ambassadors, and you build an ambassador program that will help you expand your reach in your community, and therefore will help you market your program and potentially get volunteers in the door, right? Again, doesn't have to be you. You have to also, as you're building this out, is look at, and this is more of a slide for you to take with you as part of your planning, is this is the SWOT analysis, but it's also the 5 Ps of marketing. So what are you selling? What's the price? How do you promote it? Where are you doing it? But you also have to look at, this is PEST. So this is like MBA 101, Marketing 101. What's the political landscape now? So what's working for you? What's working against you? What's your competition? Right now, I'd say the 3 of the biggest areas are hotbed right now is the economy, the social cultural, and technology. And a lot of that is driving a lot of organizations. So how do you do that and work it to your best and not as a barrier? So just a slide for you to have in the future. And market for excellence. You have to really think about what are the tools that are available now? What works, what doesn't work? So newsletters, do they work? Are you wasting your time by doing them? Do they have to look different? How are you communicating to your communities? In some communities, yeah, like volunteer displays may work for you. Library posters may work for you, but they are becoming the way of the dinosaur, and you have to look at your return on investment. Is it you're going to get more bang for your buck by letting your fingers do the walking through LinkedIn and Indeed and reaching potential networks, or spending the time putting flyers out there? I don't know. It depends on your community. Okay. I think I've talked a lot about this in terms of volunteer recruitment platforms. Those are, and there's more of them now. You have a lot of access, but what's happened is, so volunteer centers, volunteer success, Charity Village, Indeed. A lot of organizations also do postings. What's happening is they're also muddying the waters. There's too much. So how are you going to make yourself different? And so for me, it's really important that word of mouth, that you're actually got something to say and you're out there saying it, and focusing more on digital. And if you're going to do community events, make them matter, right? Get those messages out that you want to get out. In this day and age, networking for everything. So I'm kind of out of the marketing side of thing. We have to, and there's no reason why we can't support each other learn from each other, rely on each other, take content from each other. There is no proprietary things in our field. I don't believe that there are. I think that we need to network, we need to share. The fact that as an association, you're doing this, and you have a large group of supporters. So find ways, the training is one way, but also things like problem solving. Like you don't have to be doing this stuff alone, and you can be learning from each other, right? You want to engage others. So we want to be, we still want to follow the volunteer management cycle, because I believe that that is a solid way of kind of building a program. But we have to look at some important things: being responsive to the needs of volunteers, being flexible and creative. I think creativity is key right now. And there's no wrong answer here. There's no wrong way to market something. There's no wrong way to support your volunteers, right? And we have to look at how we recognize our volunteers in a way that's meaningful to them. Okay. I don't know whether we actually ask volunteers, how would you like us to support you? I don't know whether we ask them, what do you feel you could be doing that would make this experience more meaningful? Right? At the end of the day, you want to stand out in the crowd. So as I'm just watching time here a little bit, you've got a lot of slides here. You want to make sure, again, like I'm not devaluing, listen carefully to your volunteers. You need to place the right volunteers at the right time. Place quickly. That is my key message here. Don't wait too long, because competition is stiff. And if you wait too long, off they go. All right, they're not going to wait around. That's the one thing we've learned. Volunteers do not wait around. If they sent out a request for you, they've sent it out to 6 other organizations. Okay, so you got to move quick. When it comes to retaining volunteers, a couple of the key things is coaching and mentorship programs is really, really important. I think it's a way to grow volunteer programs. I think it's a way to recognize volunteers. I think it's a way to build leadership with volunteers. And it's a great way to ensure also that volunteers are staying in the right, they're not like deviating into the gray zone, right? So that is a key takeaway for me when it comes to, where we are now. I've given you some slides on mentorship and coaching. I remember at the beginning of the workshop, I said, I don't worry so much about that. I didn't follow the slides. I'm not going to talk a lot about this because, again, it's in other workshops, but I wanted to talk about it as an emerging trend. And, the new normal is a lot of organizations are looking at mentorship and coaching for volunteers. Years ago, before COVID, we started doing it with staff. And we found that, and it's no different with staff as it is with volunteers, that the soft skills are what keeps staff and volunteers engaged in their organizations. So where you have the silent quitting with staff, you're also having with volunteers. They are mirroring each other. Where you have ghosting with staff, you're having with volunteers. So volunteers are looking at those soft skills and how they feel like they're getting, not only are they giving back, but they're getting back. So consider that as an option. And also key is recognizing volunteers in ways that are meaningful to them. Okay. And some of the big takeaways now are telling the stories. How often do you ask volunteers to tell you a story, and then you take that story, and I'm not talking about testimonials, because in my opinion, testimonials can be perceived as auto-generated. Okay. When testimonials started, they were great, but now AI can do them. Like, when you go and look at, you want to buy a widget, whatever it is, and you see all these testimonials, how much of those do you trust, right? That this was the best product in the world. We know that people fake them out. So again, respecting the fact that our audience is smart. If you're going to tell the story, make it meaningful, but also what I would do is I would add the impact of that. You know, by Sheila doing ABC, this is what happened. It adds a little bit of icing to the cake. Whether people are going to believe it or not, that's out of your control. But ensure that you're telling the stories, you're showing the impact. Like I said, education is recognition. The uniqueness of formal versus informal. So after an event, or I'll give you an example, somebody's doing a Meal on Wheel program and they get a phone call from the family saying, you know, my mother just had nothing but beautiful things to say about that 5-minute conversation that they had with Jim the volunteer. Send an email to Jim and say, just want to let you know this is what happened. Wow, huge impact. Okay, that's how we do these things. And it takes time and it's not easy, but you know, because it takes away from our busy schedule, but that's what creates a fulsome volunteer program. So I gave you a couple slides on mentorship, on how to do it. It's kind of like the steps. And coaching is something that, you know, great opportunity for volunteers who are kind of working their way out of a role, but don't want to leave the organization. Okay. And then don't forget, well, those are just some examples of education, online courses, even chatting, providing current information, using your website to host resources. Again, there's no mystery here if you put the volunteer handbook on the website. There's no mystery here if you find a great resource on communication skills and put it as a volunteer resource hub, right? There's lots of things you can do. And again, you don't have to do it alone. You could come up with an idea to do it with volunteers. And if you can't do it on the website, what about creating a Facebook page for volunteers where you put those resources there? There's lots of things you can do, okay? But don't forget, this is an area we're not really great at. We have to look at assessing and measuring our programs better, because how do we know where we need to go if we don't know what we're doing well and what we're not doing well? So you want to be strategic and you want to be focused. So you have to look at measurement. And so you've got to develop an evaluation plan. So remember at the beginning, I told you you're building the strat plan. From the strat plan, you're also, that final column is, how do we know we're successful? And asking that question. What information do we need to get? And we as administrators and volunteers, don't really do it a lot because it's very time consuming. B, don't love it because it's not the fun part, and or don't have the resources to do it. But this is what allows you to tell the stories to your staff, to your leadership, to your bosses, drives future programming, opportunity to share successes. So there's a lot of value, return on investment in evaluating processes. I know a lot of organizations are starting to, because they're trying to figure out what's going on, surveys to volunteers. If you're going to do surveys to volunteers, I'm going to implore you to open-ended questions. When you do yes, no, you get nothing. So if you're going to take the time to ask volunteers and staff questions, make those questions meaningful and make them open-ended so that you have the ability to actually get some concrete information. So as I end my presentation, just a little thought process here. What can we do about this leadership course? I don't know. What do you think? Is there anyone we can ask? So my point is, take what I've given you in the hour. Don't do everything, but pick a couple of things that you can work on. Like I said, low-hanging fruit, and then come up with a plan. Sit down and think about, okay, what do I see the next year look like? And where do I find I can start moving the pendulum, right? Based on the volunteer management cycle. And take the time to take a look at the slides afterwards and, you know, see what kind of gave you that feeling. Oh yeah, I want to try that. Okay. Maybe it's creating roles, new roles. Maybe it's creating a buddy system. Anyhow, try something new.